The 4 decades of rock on 106.1 Rock Radio. All this week, the 70s, prog, punk, and power cuts. Today, the Motors.
If you were 16 in 1976, a fizzy, and a denim jacket with some Sham 69 and Sex Pistols badges sewn onto it, that was it, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, it's what every 16-year-old wanted to see on the driveway waiting for their birthday. It was like a ticket to the adult world. You could throw your 10-speed racing bike in the back of the shed and just go, sod that. and off you went, buzzing down the road, sounding like some kind of hornet stuck in a drain pipe.
And the seat was big enough for a girl on the back, of course.
They could do like 50, 55 miles an hour flat out, which is, when you're 16, I mean, when you go from a skateboard or a push bike to something that can do 50, it's like you've signed up for NASA. It's just incredible. Speed, mind-blowing.
One of the things that might have put the fear of God in you back in that day was the terribleness of the car that your father drove, because many dads at that time would have tried to stay loyal to the British car industry for reasons best known to themselves. And so many of us have less than fond memories of being cooped up in the back of Ford Escorts, Vauxhall Vivas. For some reason, my father retained an enthusiasm and passion for the products of the Roots Group. Remember the Roots Group, which was a sort of amalgamation of failed and failing British car companies? We had a lot of Hillmans, and they were...
I had a Hillman Hunter estate, he thought it was great.
He thought it was great, but it wasn't, was it?
It was actually a vast improvement on the Austin Maxi, which he bought in 1970, brand new. And then 6 months later, the engine fell out onto the road as he was driving it.
Leyland Cars. Austin, MG, Triumph, Mini, Jaguar, Daimler, Princess, Morris, Rover. All with super cover. Great cars and a great deal more.
So that finished my dad's love affair with Austins, which he'd owned from when he was a teenager. In fact, he'd had 35 vans, he'd had all kinds of Austins. But I mean, the funny thing is, the Maxi was so advanced. It was a hatchback, the first hatchback in the world, 5-speed gearbox. I think it had the fold-down seats as well, reclining seats, which was a bit of a novelty then.
Travelling salesman checking into expensive hotels or motels. Have you seen the new Austin Maxi? It turns into a portable bed. But again, more than any other car, the Maxi probably demonstrates the fact that Britain was still very capable of innovating and coming up with engineering solutions, and there were clever people working within Ford and Vauxhall and British Leyland, but it's almost like the Italian way of doing things. Great ideas, but the reality is so shoddily put together and with such poor quality materials that everyone just gets massively frustrated and goes off, and back then, just like my dad, buys a new Japanese car.
You're absolutely right. There was this terrific innovation. There were lots of people in the British car industry that were fighting to innovate and to make products that were modern and fresh and new. But they were let down by this tendency to penny pinching, and there was a bit of bolshiness from the unions as well. But once the Japanese arrived and proved that you could make a small car at a reasonable price, which had a radio, which had a velour interior, a heater that worked, an accelerator cable that didn't snap every 6 months, people bought them, of course.
How to prepare your town for the new Honda sedan. First, drive down to Main Street. Since the Honda needs very little parking space, you can make more spaces for parking there. And the Honda gets up to 40 miles a gallon. So economy-sized gas pumps are another good idea. Change your 2-lane streets into 3-lane streets, because Hondas don't need much space on the road. A couple of more basic adjustments, and you'll have a perfect town for Honda. Honda. The new little car that's already perfect for your town.
My dad went from a Hillman Avenger to a Datsun 120Y, a little Revy 1200cc engine, a 5-speed gearbox like you've said, disc brakes, and it came with free hubcaps, a vinyl roof, a radio, carpet. Yeah. Cars didn't come with carpets as standard. It was all extra, but on that 120Y Datsun, everything came as standard. But of course, the 70s saw the rise of another car industry and established really Germany as the home of prestige motor manufacturers. You see the BMW O2 series, the Mercedes S-Class, the first Mercedes S-Class, and people get this idea that German quality is worth paying for.
They do, yeah, very much so. And you start to see the first Audis, I think, arrive in the UK, Audi 80s, Audi 90s. Yeah, you're right, the first BMWs, and the first Saabs as well, I think. Saab Turbo, I think, was launched back in 76. You know, they made a Swedish car that was quite boxy, quite dull-looking, very exciting and very sexy, and I think BMW in particular managed to transform their reputation in that decade. At the start of the 70s, BMW was almost a kind of oddball car brand.
They made that booble car, didn't they? The Isetta, that thing with two wheels at the front and one at the back, that you had to break the car in half to get into it.
Quite bizarre, and definitely like an engineer's car company. But by the end of the 70s and going into the early 80s, BMW had repositioned itself as this executive mobile, salesman's cars, and it started selling pursuit cars as well, kitted up to the police. They really transformed that company in that decade. Mercedes perhaps a little less so, still kind of a staid image attached to it. The Germans sold on reliability, and Volkswagen went from being this sort of hippie Beetle and camper van producer to a producer of a car like the Golf, which arguably is the successor to the Mini.
And it's classless, isn't it? It's like you said, Alistair, the thing about the Mini was, it's classless. The Golf, again, gets us back to that position where you start to see rock stars, aristocracy, film stars in a Golf.
The Golf is a hatchback that anyone can drive of any age, any social background, whatever. And there's within the Golf family of cars, you have got everything from, I think the first one was just a 1 litre small sort of town runaround thing, up to, you know, something like a 2 litre, and then later you've got a 3.2 litre V6 GTI hot hatch we're going into the 80s. But it's really the foundation, I suppose, of the VW Audi group's prosperity. When you look back, that's where they started that huge money train. From their point of view, that's where it starts.
Is that police car a Volkswagen Rabbit?
Sure is.
A Volkswagen Rapid?
How fast was he going?
How fast was he going?
You know how fast you were going? A Volkswagen Rapid?
Were police everywhere a Volkswagen Rabbits?
Well, I don't know about everywhere, but you just watch your step in this part of North Carolina.
Volkswagen does it.